Hello, everyone. um, Thank you for tuning in and for being a part of the show today. I'm very tired, actually very exhausted. I was at this anti-deportation protest or gathering, if you will. I've kind of lost my voice a bit, so forgive me if you don't hear me the way you should hear me. That said, as the theme above, I'm calling on Gambian people to organize. And when I say to organize, means to sort of realize the importance in these times of organizing into movements and organizations and associations and cooperatives, rather than continually blind following politicians and political parties. For the past 54 years, the Gambia and her people have religiously dedicated themselves to following political parties, politicians, political leaders, and demagogues. And they have followed them devotedly, voting for them, campaigning for them, fighting each other over them, dividing communities over them. But after 54 years, I think it's time that we take stock about our affiliation to politicians and political parties and see what have we achieved from these political affiliations. Have the good been more than the evil? Have there been more progress than underdevelopment? Has there been more education than ignorance? Have there been more human and socio-cultural upliftment rather than denigration and degradation of the social capital of our people? I think these are the times when we should be very cognizant of these things and to question these hegemonic forces in our communities that sort of tell us that we should follow this and that. And it's always rooted in some sort of human right democratic discourse that it is your right to support a political party, that it is your right to follow a political leader, it is your right to vote, to express your concerns through the ballot box. It is said that our power as citizens of a country reside in our votes. But after 54 years of voting and campaigning and selecting one National Assembly member after another, one president after another, and voting in one presidential election after another, we must be able to reevaluate. If this is what power is, if this is what citizenry is, if this is what human rights and democracy is built upon, that the very edifice of power is these activities that we perform and enact every 5 years or so, then we can conclusively say that this has not been sufficient for us. And when I say us, I'm talking about the majority poor of this country, the 90%, the 80% of our society. I'm talking about the poor mother who goes to Serekunda market every day and sell vegetables in the stench of Serekunda market, in the hustle and bustle and the tightness of that place. And through that, she feeds an entire generation, clothes an entire generation, and educates an entire generation. Now, if you ask that woman whether her voting has really changed something for her, she might say a thing or two about, yes, I have been able to see my candidate win. But if you ask her, has this really been substantially life-changing activity. I believe that I can speak with certainty that she would not affirm that. She would actually say that this thing has not really worked. And then you go to the farmer who is in the countryside of the Gambia, farming on his land for 60, 50 years or less, and has voted consistently through presidential elections, National Assembly elections, constitutional referendums. And you ask this old person, this old man, this old farmer, what has he achieved through all of that process of exercising his power as a citizen of this land? He might say, like the vendor would say, that I actually did see my candidate win, and I think that is very fulfilling. But if you ask him, has this been a life-changing event or a life-changing process, this voting, this campaigning, this supporting politicians and political parties, like has it affected the way he lives substantially in a positive way? I'm afraid he would say no, that the things are still the same, that things have not really changed. There's been some infrastructural development here and there. There's been roads, there's been hospitals, there's been schools. But the hospitals have no drugs that can cure you from terminal diseases. The roads are eroded every year when the rain comes. The schools are producing high levels of failures. I mean, when I say failure here, I mean with examination results, not human beings. I don't believe schools can create failures for human beings. I think we can all reinvent ourselves and be better than what we are. But this is the situation that we have. After 54 years, following politicians and political parties have not really changed our conditions the way it should. Now we must chart another path. We must look towards something that will change the conditions of the masses of our people for good. We must be able to create an institution within the people that can actually hold power accountable in a way that is deeper than voting every 5 years. Our people are dying of curable diseases. Our educational institutions are failing. Our young people are dying and have died, have perished in the back way. Some have been caught and made into slaves in Libya. And now a lot of them have been driven after going through that emotional trauma, going through that physical hardship, and now being sent back as unwanted human beings in racist, fascist Europe. Should we give up all hope and say that maybe God doesn't like us? That's why he keeps giving us leaders who keep failing us. Or can we say that perhaps it's not God, but it's our own doing? That we are the people who will determine our own destiny, that we are the people who will chart our way forward, that we are the people who will demand for power to do what it is supposed to do in the fullness of time. Not begging the powerful, not telling them, oh, you know, like when you see these campaigns, it fills my heart with sadness every time when they go into the countryside or anywhere in the country, they meet the people's store and you see people holding the mic, begging the president, oh, ñun nak li lañ bëggoon fii ntol lafta ñu ne la jang nat resam maa koy noole yaa koy moole jang. As if you have to beg the president. But that's what they have taught us, that these are very powerful people. They are powerful beyond our comprehension. That we have to beg them, that we have to ask them favors, as if developing our country is a favor. Are we going to continue this routine, or we are going to change the status quo radically? And when I say radically here, I know there's a misconception around the word radical in the Gambia. But what radically means a fundamental transformation, going to the root of the problem and changing it from there. I'll tell you something, Gambia. Deportations are just symptoms of a disease. Migrations are symptoms of a disease. What then is the disease that is causing all these problems? What is the disease that has put us in this place for so long? Why are the kids failing their examination en masse in our schools? Why are our hospitals, even though the nurses and the doctors there are trying so hard, and kudos to them, trying so hard to keep us alive? Why is it that even after all that, there is not enough facilities for them to take care of us? Is poverty the deliberate creation of God upon a people like us? Or is it policies of the powerful, economic systems that keep us in our place? These are the questions we should be asking. And I believe that it's not God who has put us in this place, because we are the ones who are responsible for our lives. We are the ones who wake up every day and look for food to eat, water to drink, and taking care of ourselves and the bare necessities of life. God doesn't come down and do that for us. Now, on a collective basis, it is our responsibility as a people to sit down and have honest conversations in this country about the way forward. I will assure you one thing though. The current political system, the current political parties, the current politicians and leaders have assured us that they care more about themselves than about us. You can go on and be emotional about this, and you can insult me and say, I don't respect political leaders, I don't respect political parties. But I'll say this much, that I see the suffering of my people every day. I didn't become an activist because I want to sit here and talk, or I want to be popular, or I want to be famous, or I want to be seen as a troublemaker. I became an activist because I believe we deserve so much more than this. We deserve so much more than being people who are only important to politicians when it's time to gather and give them our votes. That we are so much more important than, going to bed hungry because there's no food. That we are so much more than all of these things that are happening to us. Every human being must be dignified in their labor, in their everyday life, and that their life cannot be reduced to statistics, cannot be reduced to mere numbers on a World Bank chart of less than $1 a day. I believe that we can actually change our condition, that we can create a society that will move the very heart of God. But this is only will happen when we are conscious of the fact. So this is not a disrespect to politicians or political parties or people who support them. But this is a conversation I want to have with you people, because I believe that we must build movements now. We must build organizations. That the company in the society should actually create women movements that will demand what is theirs, that will create alternative societies built upon justice, equity, and egalitarianism. Those organizations that support the political parties, all of these political party organizations in our various villages and towns, they should change their focus and start talking about how do we change things ourselves. How do we understand what change is? How do we deal with this burst pipe in the community? Everywhere you go in Combo, there is a burst pipe somewhere and there's water spilling all over. If the community is united and they created a communal understanding, they can fix that problem. A lot of the conflicts we have in our society is because there is none of these things happening. Politicians come and divide us because there is no unity amongst us. And on a national level, young people, old people, all of us must come together, create movements. It doesn't have to be one movement. There can be movements and organizations that are looking at, let's say, the issue of shelter. Another organization could be looking at the issue of political and socio-economic rights. Another could be looking at the preservation of culture and the promotion of knowledge. And how do we educate and enlighten our people? But at this time, we are all we got. These politicians are not what we have. We are what we have. Long after all these politicians are gone, long after you and I are gone, this land will still be here. And the children, they would be here. Those who will come after us, and they will ask these questions. What did these people do for us to deserve these wretched and poor conditions? Didn't they know that they could have done something because we will be coming? But we know we are suspending the future in trying to build the career of politicians and professionals, whilst our mothers are still at Serekunda market, can't sell nothing, still overtaxed. The old farmer is now being pushed out of his farmland to be given to real estates, companies. But we are still here divided over, I support this party and I support that party and I support this politician and I support that politician. Not seeing the land is being stolen right off our feet. Our rights have been stolen right off our feet. The fact that you have a president who had an agreement with the Gambian people that he would step down after 3 years, and now he reneged and he became a renegade to that promise. That is a politician for you. But no, we will still keep fighting over them. We will still keep, being divided over them. My party is better than your party. My politician speaks better English than yours. My party leader is this and that. This is not going to change our conditions, my people. Let's start building movements. Your freedom is not for you to beg for. The development that the politicians should create in our communities is not something you beg for at the Meet the People store or a political rally. It is something you demand. You have to take it. There is no other way. But if you keep believing this lie, that these people will redeem us, 54 years, nothing has changed. They have signed deals with the World Bank and the IMF, created neoliberal policies in our land, created vast economic wastelands. That's why our young people, my brothers and sisters, are still dying in the back way. Some have come back home with mental illnesses. But still we can't open up our eyes. They've sold us so much illusions. This is not the way forward. Let's build organizations. Let's take to the streets. Let's sit down in our corners. Let's sit in buildings. Let's meet. Let's talk. Let's get to know each other. We are not enemies. Don't let these politicians divide us. We are not enemies of one another. We are sisters and brothers. We are comrades. We are the same people. And this is not just for Gambians. This is for the Senegalese who lives here, the Nigerian who lives here, the Ghanaian. As long as you are an African, you belong to this land. And there is no other way to it. If you're going to speak out against xenophobia and anti-deportation because you are mad about it, it's about time you start speaking out against the xenophobia that other nationals of the African continent face in this country. These are the conversations we should be having. So we must come together. Let's see how we can build organizations. And not just organizations that just, we cannot do this because there's no funding. No. Build organizations that you will fund yourself, that can fund themselves. Create community libraries. You are a school graduate. You are a university student. What can you do in your poor neighborhood to give classes to the kids whose parents can never afford a private tutor, a private teacher? Create a community. Create a safe space where you can teach these young people. Teach them not just their textbook, but to be enlightened, to understand the ways of the world, to understand the forces that are against them. And we must be able to identify those forces. We must be able to identify capitalism and how it works here. The petty bourgeois, this neo-colonial, lychee petty bourgeois of this country, who since 1965 have been robbing this country continually with slogans and whatnot that they are selling us. Tell these young people that poverty is not God created. It was created by human beings, and that poverty is big business. And there are people who profit from your poverty. Because when there is no poor person, there will be no rich person. And when there is no rich person, there will be no poor person. One feeds the other. How do we understand this system? These are the type of things we should be talking about, but not talking about, yeah, this politician, that politician. We should be thinking bigger. How do we change everything? We must change everything. We must change the economic status quo. We must change the political status quo. We must change the cultural status quo. We must change everything in this country. But that will not happen if we don't build movements and organize. And no, you don't have to build movements to appeal to the sensibilities of politicians or to appeal to the sensibilities of the educated. You have to build movements that appeal to the sensibilities of the poorest, most marginalized, most oppressed, most downtrodden amongst you. And until that time, until we do this, until we realize that we are no different from each other, that the political party you support will not bail you out from your suffering, unless we build movements. Out of these movements, we build progressive political parties that are answerable directly to the people of the Gambia, and then we put them forward and they rule this country accountable to the people. You will only have an elite class of politicians who will keep oppressing you and robbing you of your wealth as a nation, of your propriety as a nation, of your intellect as a nation, continually until you have created a complete wasteland. I said earlier that migration is a symptom of a deeper disease. No human being will go into the high waters of the Mediterranean and drown there in an effort to reach Lampedusa. No human being will go to a place knowing that they could be enslaved and still go in there. Nobody will take that hard road through Mali and Niger into Libya if the things at home are not as dire and as bad. We must build this land. The problem is migration, this migration. Let's not please call this irregular migration. There is no such thing as irregular. There is irregularized migration, and people who decide that this form of migration is regular, and they are wrong, because every form of migration is legit. People have moved like that. Europeans came to this country they came to this continent through the ocean. They were sailors. They came through the back way too then. So this is the point. This migration problem, this deportation problem is symptomatic of a deeper problem. And that problem is that we must be able to rise out of poverty. Forget poverty reduction. We don't need poverty reduction, that our people are just poor to a certain level. No, we need the destruction of poverty itself. Forget these rhetorics of poverty reduction and sustainable development. What do they mean when you don't see them? You can write all the PRSP papers, the poverty reduction strategic paper, all of these, all the Vision 2020s, all of the National Development Plan. If it is not affecting the life of the everyday person and changing their societies, then it is completely useless. And you, as a Gambian, you should start thinking in that direction. How do we build organizations? How do we scrutinize the government? How do we change our realities? How do we help each other? How do we build solidarity economies? How do we build cooperatives where we can, before you talk about, there's a person who wants to do a business, but then, the only thing available for them is to go to a European Union project that is anti-migration that is here to keep you in your place, this neo-colonial youth empowerment project. Forget that. We need to build our own cooperatives, our own credit unions in our communities. When somebody needs money, the community can give them money. We've been doing this for centuries. The Osusu has been here for centuries. It's something like that. How can we institutionalize that within our communities? Build solidarity economies. This is the mandate of our time. But you can choose either to enter joyfully into history and change the conditions of our people, or you can choose to be on the strong side of history and follow these politicians and argue with people and hate people for it and, insult people whilst your people are still here, still suffering after many years. There are people still alive from independence. They've never seen anything change for themselves. So start thinking in that way. This was just supposed to be a short reflection. And, thank you very much for listening. Till I come your way next Thursday. One love.